Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of the Art of the Moment podcast. I am your host, Key, joined by none other than Amir for a very special episode in the month of October. 40 years after John Carpenter's classic, we are reunited with Halloween, directed by
David Green.
David Green is his name. Of course, this is a top. Our reviews were off the top of the dome here. Fantastic film. I was very, very impressed. It seems like he agrees.
Yeah. Like I said, I'll give the film a 7. Biasly, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. I clearly am a fan of the franchise. Love to see Halloween, done again. I had a good time for that reason. But as a film, if I was like an objective critic trying to be more objective, I'd probably go down to 7.5. But I had a good time nonetheless.
Yeah, I'd settle around an 8.5 out of 10. I think the film really impressed me. Definitely a long-standing Halloween fan, and I'm coming at the impression of the series that has been definitely ups and downs, and plenty of classics, plenty of shit shows, and this one definitely stands out as one of the more impressive films in my mind in recent memory. Of course, this is primarily a spoiler-free review, so if you haven't seen the movie, go do yourself a favor, enjoy a slasher flick with your popcorn at the film. Of course, come back and see our thoughts of why we thought this was probably one of Michael Myers' greater outings. So without further ado, let's get into our spoiler talk here. Generally speaking, the pros I wanted to mention for me was coming into this film that there was, right off the bat, I think the best plus that I could give this film is pretty good cinematography all the way through, and in ways where the presence of Michael Myers, the actual shots, the kills, I was saying before, just even the kills themselves are so, it becomes like an orchestra of a scene, and where it's the moments Michael Myers lays eyes on his victim and the target, the whole shot is done in such a way where it's more than just the final blow. There's particular scenes where the camera's just placed. Probably one of my favorite ones, right outside of the window, and you can see him coming into the window to observe, and then he's maneuvering around the house, and then he appears from the back, and the camera never moves. And there's other scenes where he's just courtesy of Nick Castle from the very first movie coming back, and he is the perfect man for the job. So.
Some of the scenes almost like they feel like they're one take. Like he'll follow him as he does, certain acts during kills. It's like he'll kill somebody, and this scene will just keep on going. We'll keep following him to the next kill.
And it's pretty riveting all the way through to watch.
It's reminiscent of in particular, I remember Halloween 2, when he's walking through the town at night. It just follows him from the back. So he's walking and it just keeps following him. It's a lot of throwbacks to the first two, especially there's a couple of scenes that are apparent. I liked it that were kind of, it's almost like it's reversing it. Like a lot of the scenes that have to do with him in the first one now have to do with Laurie Strode too, that are throwbacks.
I agree. There's a lot of cool moments, you mentioned Laurie Strode appearing from the dark at the very end there. Of course, the big one for falling off the balcony. But there's a lot of these things, even just Loomis's little cameo and his voice showing up for that. I think for a fan like myself of the series, these are just great things, and by no means they don't. I'm not going to pull a Batman vs Superman here and say that these things save the film. So the film is good on its own. It stands as a good horror flick with a few bumps in the road, and we'll get into those a little bit for sure. But I think generally speaking, I think an 8.5 is a well-rounded film for me that's entertaining all the way through. It's And whenever it is focused on the main plot point of Laurie Strode and Michael Myers, the film shines. And then, of course, when it derails from that focus, there tends to be some speed bumps ahead. So
the film, if we're seeing this not knowing of any films that came before it, we would have thought it was a really good film. It's an interesting character. The character himself is just kind of fascinating. He's been locked up for 40 years and hasn't uttered a word, right?
Yeah.
We just know nothing about him. On the fact that now he breaks out and is, just killing people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just menacing character. It's fascinating to just kind of just try to find out more. I don't know, just see whenever you see him, you just
it's
kind of.
Just I think what's terrifying with him, and again, this is seen in all the films, particularly in this one. Again, it's just kind of reiterated that his level of focus on what he cares about, which seems to be just killing people. Again, I'm not going to pretend to know more about what's going on in his mind, but it's just what his level of focus is just terrifying here because it's just. Yeah, he's still smart enough to maneuver his way around. I mean, he knows particular scenes, where to do his acts, where to show up, especially the scenes where he's walking through the town during the trick or treating and all that stuff. Like he's smart enough to know how to maneuver, but it's still that he's unwavering in that way. Like he's fixed on this goal, and the fact that he's been in an institution for 40 years because he has nothing, he can't do anything. He's nothing to do there. He could kill everyone else, but he doesn't have any weapons, and he's pretty chained down. So, it's just frightening because it's just so not like any of us.
Yeah.
It's frightening, and it's because of how just unsettling it is.
Yeah, and he's like, we're afraid of the unknown. The fact that he becomes more unknown, the fact that we can't get nothing from him.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of the things that fascinates the new psychiatrist that takes over to supervise his care is fascinated with. This character he's a unique specimen. And he's just so unknown that you can't get him to utter a word to find out what his motives are. Is he driven by feelings? Is he driven by, like you said, like the rational part of his brain? Like, is he goal oriented? But why? Then the follow up question would be why.
Yeah, I mean, if evil in some way is a physical entity, if it exists in this world, I mean, he's seeing this as this is an opportunity almost as a scientist that I can jump onto and see
Loomis,
where I could see this.
Loomis saw that. I like that there's a scene in there where he recorded.
Yeah,
it's a recording of Loomis saying that the only treatment that he needs is just extermination.
He said a good line where he said something along the lines of there's no point in allowing such evil to persist in this world.
Yeah, exactly.
Recognizing this what it is, you need to just get rid of it.
Incinerate his whole body. Yeah, just get rid of him.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Which is interesting because once the twist happens with this character, the first time I was left a little uneasy about it. But as I contemplated his almost Mandarin moment in this movie where he just
the new psychiatrist.
He has a twist of heart where he wants to protect Michael. It's an interesting scene, but it's on second viewing. It's very obvious to me that there was so many clues along the way, and in fact it was very honest to his character. In fact, that he did that.
Well, it's like the beginning scene when he pulls up the mask. And Michael Myers just stands there, but these two podcasters, you want to call them, or
investigative
journalists, they come to him at the facility and they pull a mask out just to try to provoke a reaction out of him, and he just stands there, almost catatonic, not responding at all. Whereas the rest of the inmates are just freaking out. I like that scene. It connotes a sense of there is something metaphysical between the mask and him, and I think the new psychiatrist noticed it. And I think that kind of fueled his fascination with Michael Myers. And
I agree.
There's something there, something metaphysical. I think maybe that evil concept is a metaphysical evil that lurks inside of him.
Perhaps, yeah.
And that he wanted to see how would it express itself in outside of his natural habitat, which is on the streets of Haddonfield, or at least be reunited with maybe Laurie.
He mentioned exactly that scene later where he's talking about the idea that Laurie does serve as prey in a way, and yet she's probably just as fueled as that. And in fact, her behavior in the film over the course of 40 years signifies that she's definitely fueled to a great degree in her life about being prey and obviously preventing that. But
and also she's the unfinished kill that he attempted in the first one.
Certainly, yeah. So he's driven as a predator in that way. But this is again these things. Again, I'm just saying that they definitely do. He created an honest character in that way, where it makes most sense that he would allow such evil to persist in the world. But I agree.
Actually, it's definitely worth a watch, but it doesn't come without its problems, and I think the major problem I would say are the contrivances, and the ones more apparent are the ones have to do with Laurie Strode's granddaughter.
Yeah.
So from the get-go, we introduced her. She has a daughter and a granddaughter, and the daughter has kind of separated from her mother because her mother for a long time has been training her to prep for this moment. But then it seems like she wants to create life for herself. She creates a family, but then she has a granddaughter, and the relationship between the granddaughter and the grandmother, which is Lori, seems like it's rocky because the mother doesn't want Lori's influence onto her daughter.
Yeah.
But then, so the movie gives us more about her granddaughter, but it just seems contrived. It seems like it doesn't go anywhere. So it introduces us to her boyfriend, and that doesn't really go anywhere. There's a scene where they're intimate locker scene in the beginning, and then later on there's a party they go to, and just for timing, he cheats on her, and I was like, well, it just seems contrived.
Yeah, I do agree because on second viewing of the film, I'm noticing that the big point that I made was, or the unfortunate one, is that the movie is structured in a way where those particular scenes really have no impact on anything.
Yeah.
And the moment she goes to this party and the film is, the course of action is dependent on this argument that they have. He throws a phone into the pudding, so she has, or her parents have no way of contacting.
Yeah.
This is the Allison character. She's left to leave the party with some other kid, friend of theirs.
What bothers me is without her smartphone. Like at an age with smartphones, you throw my smartphone in the pudding, I'll still take it out. And let alone, I would assume they would work. Because most smartphones would now are IP certified, right?
This is a moment where she's declaring that you and me are finished, right? Her and her boyfriend is finished. And I'm going to continue the rest of my life without my phone, right? Yeah. So I'm just going to go on with my day.
But you can throw my phone in the pudding. I'm not trying to get it back.
Right. Just like you and I have had an argument, and I get that there's a character here who's probably at an age where like I'm going to do that just to spite you.
Yes.
Like okay, yeah, like what really matters in this moment is this argument we're having, and I'm just like, F you, we're done, and blah blah blah. But I don't know. You're right. I do think that there's a moment.
The characters are set up like organic. They feel like real people, and that's what's beautiful about the kills. Like you feel like he's actually killing real people because they set him up as real people. But some of the decisions they make feel contrived, and that's because they want the plot to go a certain way.
And I think what doesn't help its favor is the fact that we already bring that up, and then it goes into, of course, her friend, whatever his name is, gets killed in the courtyard area. That she eventually discovers that Michael has returned, and then she's running off her day. But she's going back to the cop car, to the psychiatrist portrayal scene, if you will, and then eventually a long-winded way of having her reunion to the parents.
Yes. Yes.
Those scenes, I argue, would happen regardless if she was there or not, because it seems those characters are not motivated by her presence in any such way.
Yeah,
but now that renders it even more useless, right? That we had those detours. In the grand scheme of things, just doesn't really do anything interesting other than just here's a character we wanted to have attempted developing, but we failed.
Well, three pivotal scenes for her happened. The first scene is Alicia's relation with coming to contact with Michael Myers, right? The first scene is where she's with her friend in the courtyard, and survived it, right? The second scene is in the car, she survived it. And the third scene, she got back to the house, she survived it. It's almost like she got lucky 3 times. She doesn't seem like more fit to survive in contact with Michael Myers, but it played out a certain way where it played out kind of just right for her to survive. It just feels contrived. It feels like they didn't want to kill her off. Everybody else is getting massacred left and right.
And like I said, the last shot of the movie is a focus in on the knife that she's holding, and then it cuts to Halloween, and so I'm not going to try to read too much into it. If she is some sort of the next Laurie Strode, if you will, for the future of the series, which if it is, again, I have no problem with that. That's a conversation we can have if that happens. But it is something where it almost makes me wonder if they're setting up something for futures here, or if you just have filler in a movie. Regardless, I think we could both agree that those scenes are fairly boring. And the scenes that, this her party scene and her with her boyfriend. Because we also spent time with her boyfriend who is in no way, shape, or form some sort of independent variable in this film.
Yeah, we never see him again. After so you give us a scene with him, having a dinner with her parents. And I was like, okay, they must be setting up these characters. So he must be integral. Only for him to cheat on her, for her to lose her phone.
Yeah.
And never to see him again. So it's almost like, why give introduction to him this much?
Yeah.
So it seems like he's just a character. Like you could have just started with a party and then you just found out that he was the date that she was going to see.
Sure,
And then you find he cheated on her, and that would have been more convincing because you didn't know his background. You didn't know he came to visit the family. Or you just assumed that he just invited her to the prom or to this not the prom but this Halloween party, and he seems like he's cheating on her, so she bailed on the party. Something like that. I was like that would have been more. That would have got the same idea across without having to give us scenes with him more that we're not necessarily need.
There is I do agree with that, and the other scene that I think was worth mentioning because I've heard it from other reviewers, but there is the cop scene. So it's a 30-second exchange between lunches between cops in a car, and on second viewing, so first viewing it didn't bother me as much, but second viewing it just seemed to be like, I can see how much this just stands out. I mean, it just it's night and day, but it's a rather, for all intents and purposes, useless scene.
Yeah. Well, it's like trying to bring humor to the movie.
Yeah.
But the film is it's pitching itself as very serious. It's very, from the get go with that first scene that we get Michael Myers killing those two journalists. It's pretty intense, and to keep that consistency, it's almost like it wants to break the dread. It wants to break the fear. And
I mean, it's a film that I like the sense of this film. From a general point of view, I do think it with the journalists and everything. There is I mean, we're watching a movie of a man who is just unapologetically killing you at your most vulnerable moment. Yeah. I mean, it is a rather heavy content to deal with, and the film, it generally approaches it with balls. I mean, we know what we're doing here, and I mean, it's still immensely entertaining, but at the same time, it's like it's serious and it's meant to freak you out. And so to have those moments show up out of nowhere, 5 minutes before he's about to, do whatever he does to you, gorge your eyes out or whatever. It's weirdly out of place. Yeah, and I felt like someone to say, like, let's introduce some levity in him.
Yeah, it's a little more accepting in the beginning of the film. Like, they have a little more scenes where the characters are calm and chalant.
No, I agree.
And then have them present a little bit of comic relief. But as the film goes on, I think you have to shy away from it more because it's clearly getting more intense and like this is like right after he did some severe drastic kills. And I know you want to introduce more cannon fodder and more characters to take out, but maybe not know what's going on. But I think these cops have awareness that at this point of the game that there's this killer on the loose. You know what I'm saying? So I think
I agree. They should be somewhat aware, and it's a wrong placing. You said before, the beginning of the movie is not fine, but the placing in which, because it's surrounded by these heavy events that it just doesn't really thrive on its own in any particular way.
It needs to be more focused. Like certain films that are great, like last year's Blade Runner 2049. It doesn't lose focus of what it's trying to do. It stays focused. The set, the atmosphere that it wants to create keeps it consistent. This is not trying to be a horror. This is not it's just trying to be a pure sci-fi. Yeah. And I think if it focuses more on just being a horror, I think it would have been a lot better too here. I think because it get rid of some of these scenes.
Yeah, and again, it's pretty. There are hiccups along the way. It doesn't ruin the experience for me at all because it is the larger acts of the film from the beginning to end. Even we can talk about the end a little bit here, which I thought was pretty fantastic all the way around. I have almost barely any problem with it, except for the issue that we talked about the granddaughter being lucky, coming at just the scene where he's busy. But generally, I thought there was. I mean, again, that was one of the moments where there's a lot of suspense in that scene. So the final showdown has been set up. There's a fascinating, shot from sort of outside the house. I think right after the father dies, or no, I'm not 100% sure. But anyhow, that whole setup for me was pretty well done. It's entertaining. And I thought generally the pieces work really well. So to lead up to his trap and his death, quote unquote. I don't know if you have any thoughts to share on that particularly.
No, actually, my biggest gripe with the film is just I would say the scenes with the granddaughter. Unfortunately, it does take up a good chunk of the film, but everything around that I was quite entertained by.
A quarter of the film, probably.
Everything around the granddaughter I was quite entertained by. But I feel like every time her narrative comes along, it takes you away from what you wanted to see.
Yeah, a little bit. I definitely noticed that on the second viewing.
There's a scene where on the way back to the cabin, she stumbles upon these mannequins that Laurie's using for gun range.
Yeah.
And she's like, just kind of start with all of them and just start screaming to the moon. And like, just set that in place. Like, I didn't need to see that.
It was, and it's funny because I think I noticed how, well, the cutting to the scene, but particularly the cutting away from that scene. So the scene happens and it cuts immediately back because it's done. There's nothing else to show, and you left with a weird like, what the heck was that about?
Yeah.
Like I was just like, what was that about? And you went back to the scene that really mattered because that's what you were waiting for. I don't particularly remember what happened there, but it is. I had one last question, I guess, to bring up here, and it's an interesting thought because we're presented with a Laurie Strode in this film that is sort of having, for all those purposes, a great deal of PTSD after the first film, 40 years later. And it makes sense to me. I actually really like her preparations. She's motivated to a great degree of creating a house that, as we know, is highly rigged, trading her daughter, blah, blah, blah. But she seems to have problems. They keep bringing up in the movie that she seems to have problems with her family. And, like, there's a scene where she's talking to her the granddaughter at school about how, like, she's like, it's coming at the cost of your family. Go talk to Michael, let it go. Does it almost strike you in a weird way where this character, like, I get that has all these motivations, and she believes that she lives in a world where this psychopath killer is going to come back for her. She's almost like she caught a glimpse of this character in the first film that she knows he's focused and he will come back to finish the job. But they're pitching it as a way she can't function for 4 years. In that way. I wouldn't say
not function. I think the journalist says something about she had 2 divorces and she lost custody of her daughter when her daughter was young, implying that somehow she had a difficult time growing up, or difficulty because of the what happened in the first film. And then she makes it's like for 40 years this man is locked up in an institution. It doesn't make sense to me, I guess, to a certain degree. Maybe I'm downplaying it a little bit here. That I guess the character would be on edge for 40 years. I mean, there's a certain point where you can kind of like, okay, I can assume. Well, like she wants to just be like she was traumatized by it, but she wants to be ready for the time when he comes back to get me.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's for her, it's not over until the perpetrator is dead.
It's not over until it's over.
Yeah, it's not over until it's over. And for her, the fact that she knows he's still alive there, and he can come back for it in time if he breaks out or something like that. I think it was needed for the film to have a sequel. I can let that slide from the get.
I actually quite liked it overall, and I have no problem with that. I just thought it was fairly interesting to talk
I guess introduced early on in the film. I was like, okay, this is where it wants to do with Laurie. Okay, well, I'll just go with it. I kind of accept that. I do think there's a little difficulty with justifying her and her kids, like her kid and grandkid. Because like I was saying, her kid wants to live a normal life. But then if that's the case, all she'd have to do is just get out of town, right? Take her daughter, get out of town, not have to deal with this, and not go to her mom's house if you know that he's coming back to her house.
Well, I suppose.
So it's hard to justify the decisions they make at the end.
Not necessarily. I think that's a probably likelihood.
But you can excuse it with the fact that the granddaughter's missing, right?
Sure.
So the fact that the granddaughter's missing, maybe they came back to the house hoping that the granddaughter will show up there again.
Yeah.
But like I said, if I keep digging down, sometimes you can find apparent problems. But like I said, I like those. My main gripe is just the granddaughter. I say her plots seem contrived.
Yeah, no, I agree, but overall, again, just closing thoughts. I think for me, it's just that the film has those problems, but it is extremely entertaining all the way through in a way that I think that probably sets the bar for what Halloween is capable of these series, and so I hope they continue to pursue that. I guess that just even the place of the music at certain points of the movie is it's really effective, and how they do that to. The directing, the actual acting all the way around is pretty impressive. So definitely go watch this film, enjoy it, and stay tuned for the return of